Well, it was a really good deal for Vinny Curry, I guess. He's got to be pretty happy with it. And as you pointed out, he's had whatever 16 and a half sacks, something like that over the last 3 years, but that was only in limited playing time. I mean, that's one thing to remember there. He's never started a game his whole career, actually. And, he was playing in the wrong scheme, but he did have 9 sacks in 2014. So in that sense, I think, he's shown he's got some value. But I think what you're seeing here is that, these contracts are more about Howie Roseman giving a stamp of approval to Howie Roseman. I mean, these are guys that Howie Roseman had a hand in drafting and acquiring for the Eagles. And, he's sort of showing that, hey, look, in the second round, I got a guy that's going to be a starting defensive end for us. He's worth this much money. I mean, that's Howie Roseman's second-round pick. So it looks like Howie Roseman must have made a great pick if they're paying the guy that much money on his second contract. So I think there's a little bit of both things in the mix. I don't think it's a terrible deal for the Eagles. Curry's a decent player, and they're going to need, more defensive linemen now that they're going to a 4-3. So in that sense, you have a guy that, he's a good player. He's a solid guy. They like him. There's nothing wrong with keeping your own guys and rewarding them, but I do think it has a little more to do with Howie Roseman kind of making a comment about Howie Roseman himself instead of the player.
Phil, is it safe to say, and he kind of commented on this today, but if Chip Kelly's still here, Vinny Curry is not?
Yeah, I think that's probably safe to say. That's kind of what Vinny said today, that, if they were going to stay in the 3-4, I mean, really the fact that he's been here for 3 years, playing in the wrong scheme, playing out of position basically, has been, it's been tough. Even when, when they first kind of announced the Jim Schwartz hiring, I think Fletcher Cox said on Twitter something like, a 4-3, exclamation points and happy looking emojis or something like that. He didn't really use a lot of words to express it, but you could tell that Fletcher Cox is pretty excited to be going back to the 4-3 too. It's a lot easier on players to play in a 4-3 scheme, especially defensive linemen. Instead of two gapping and basically your job being to get blocked by to take up blockers basically and be a tackling dummy. Instead of doing that, you get to attack and be creative and aggressive. Most defensive linemen prefer that much more than they do playing at 3-4.
Yeah, Phil, and you mentioned Fletcher Cox, and Curry added, in the press conference today that Fletcher Cox had a lot to do with him signing, and then he really kind of insinuated that he thinks Fletcher Cox will get a contract extension too. Is that next on the hit list for Howie Roseman, who seems to be in a very handing out contracts type of mood these days?
Yeah, that seems to be the priority here. Looking at it, it's pretty clear that Roseman's trying to go back to what they used to do when Joe Banner was running contracts, and Howie did it as well when he got kind of followed Banner's lead on that stuff. And it makes sense, to get your guys, if you draft well, develop well, bring guys along in your system and everything. Now guys are going to be changing offensive and defensive systems, so it's not like the same continuity you would have without the coaching change. But you're changing the coaching staff, you're changing the way you play on offense and defense. Having some of the players that you like and have already kind of got acclimated to this whole situation in Philadelphia, and keeping them and rewarding them and tying them up for the long term, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And it creates the salary cap kind of certainty. You have a lot of players tied up, and you kind of know where you stand with the cap. It allows you the freedom and the flexibility to do things either in free agency or, for example, the Sam Bradford type deal. But yeah, Fletcher Cox is going to be the next domino to fall. They did use the option year on him, which means that he is under contract for another year. So it's not like he's imminently going to go to free agency. So they have that to fall back on. But I do think they want to get that done. Going into this year before he is going into free agency next year.
I was going to say, one question would be, can they afford both Fletcher Cox and Sam Bradford, or would they have to basically make a decision between those two guys?
No, they can. If they want to get them both done, they could get them both done. The salary cap's going up again. It's been going up like $10 million a year for the last couple of years. That's a really big jump. And with these new TV deals the NFL just signed, all projections are it's going to just keep going up at that rate for the next couple of years. So they can get them done. And you can trim some salary cap space if you need it. You can create space. There are some players on the roster that they could, potentially move on from and release that they might not otherwise. Guys that might be on the bubble for them, the tipping point might be, all right, we can use this extra salary cap space to get these other deals done. So I think they're fine without doing too much of that at this point. But if if they do need to, create a little bit of space, they can still do that as well.
Yeah, we're talking with Phil Sheridan, ESPN.com's NFL Nation. Vinny Curry signs a big-time deal to come back to the Philadelphia Eagles. And I guess they're really, Phil, not only for Roseman's sake, but trying to show guys, that, hey, we drafted you and we're appreciative of you, something that maybe a lot of these guys didn't feel. I mean, Curry kind of insinuated today that no one really talked to him last year and told him his role on the team. It seems like there was a lot of bad communication the last couple of years.
Yeah, well, I think we're, that's kind of the fallout from the whole Chip Kelly thing. I think we're going to see and hear a lot of that since Kelly's gone now. It's pretty clear that players did not feel, that connected. I don't know if you saw the Malcolm Jenkins was on TV the last day or two from the Super Bowl, so he's talking about, basically, just that he got along with Kelly fine, but that he understood that, a lot of guys didn't have that feeling that there was an open door policy that they could talk to the guy. And for Curry to say that, I mean, that tells you a little bit about what Jeff Lurie's been talking about. He must have been hearing from players, and kind of touching base with guys saying, hey, what's going on? How's it going? He must have been getting enough of feedback from people saying that they did not feel comfortable or connected or, kind of in tune with what Chip Kelly was doing. And if that is going on, if you have a lot of guys on your team that feel that way, that tells you something that's pretty wrong with the situation. And the easiest way to fix that is to change the guy at the top.
Phil, a lot of guys are getting deals, but one guy who doesn't seem like there's a lot of buzz about is Cedric Thornton. He's been a nice little fit for that 3-4 defense. Does this change to the 4-3 mean that he's kind of an odd man out?
Yeah, he may be. And, I wouldn't be surprised if they did bring him back because, when he first got to the team, they were running the 4-3. He didn't really play much. He's really made it as an end in the 3-4. And, again, that's, he's been a good solid guy. And, the way you have to come play, taking up two gaps and, commanding blockers and all that stuff and being good against the run, that's a big part of what he had to do. He's not as dynamic a pass rusher kind of a guy as some of these other guys are, including Vinny Curry for that matter. But, Thornton's been a solid player for them. And, if he wants to do it and they want him to do it, I would sure that they could get him back at a pretty reasonable number. So if they want him back, I don't think it'll take much to get.
Talking with Phil Sheridan here, ESPN.com. Of course, the Eagles making some moves, and we talk about Curry getting locked up to that 5-year deal, and Fletcher Cox might be next. But I guess the big question is now Sam Bradford. It seems like it's a very fluid situation. Phil, does he want to be here? Do they want him to be here? But I guess right now there's no more clues to make us feel like that is there's anything definitive there.
No, I mean, the news I can tell from reading the tea leaves and listening to what everybody says is, that they want to go through this, process of looking at, they went to the Senior Bowl and look at Carson Wentz. You go to the combine and get a look at all these guys that are going to come out in the draft. Get a feel for what's going to be available in the draft, and get a sense of if you really like any of these guys, and if they're likely to be available when you pick at number 13, and do that process, and based on that, then you decide, is Sam Bradford like a high priority, like we have to get him, or is he a nice guy to get if we can at a reasonable price, but we'd rather have a rookie to develop as well, or we really love this rookie, we want to make that guy our franchise guy and just forget about Bradford altogether. So I think it's assess the rookie, get a feel for where what the draft is going to bring and what it could, what could develop there, and which of those guys you might want to target. And then, as you go through that process, then you get to when the free agency period starts, then you got to make a decision on Bradford. So, they could always franchise him. They have used the franchise tag and then lifted it from players in the past, so they got out of using it. They could do something like that if they had to. I don't know if that's the ideal way to go. The best thing to do is if you're going to go with Bradford, is to commit to him, really make an effort to sign him to a real deal, make him feel like he's the franchise guy, and then treat him that way. and you might get a franchise guy in return. I think playing him, with all the different angles you can use, franchise tag and all that stuff, it favors teams over the players. It's where the CBA is written. But using that, kind of makes guys, they don't tend to like it. Players don't really tend to like being franchise tagged. So if you get to that point with Bradford, I think, it's going to hurt you as much as it helps you, because the player doesn't want to be here and doesn't like you using the franchise tag to keep him here. That's not a good way to develop the relationship. The ideal thing would be decide who it is and go hard after him, whether it's a rookie or Bradford. I don't think they know for sure themselves yet.
Yeah, Phil, and one interesting thing is, I think a lot of people looked at Roseman as kind of the de facto GM anyway, but what do you make of the report yesterday that basically said the Eagles are going to put that on hold for now until after the draft? I guess that really suggests that Roseman is running everything, and I wonder if you have any thought on how that might play in for Bradford, because Bradford, quite frankly, wasn't a Roseman guy.
Yeah, that's something I've actually been thinking about, too, is that, it would be a big mistake for me, in my mind, for Howie Roseman to view Bradford as a Chip Kelly guy, because, Sam Bradford, he got traded here. He didn't sign here to come play for Chip Kelly. He got traded, but, Chip Kelly was the guy that did the deal, but, Howie Roseman's best bet here is to look at the entire roster and everybody on it, including Sam Bradford, and maybe especially Sam Bradford, as assets. We have these guys. What's the best we can do with the team going forward? Forget how they got here, who picked who, what Chip Kelly had to do with it. Sam Bradford was not, married to Chip Kelly. It's not like Chip Kelly was the guy he wanted to play for, and he loved playing for. He enjoyed the offense and felt like he was getting better at it, and was disappointed to have to learn a new one. But if he's going back to a West Coast type system like he played in his rookie year under Pat Shurmur in St. Louis, I think he'll be fine with that. It would be a big mistake for Roseman, and it wouldn't be a big mistake for Roseman to decide that Bradford isn't a great franchise-type quarterback, if that's his honest assessment. But to judge Bradford in any way based on Chip Kelly's involvement in all this, that would just be petty and the kind of small-minded thing that has gotten Roseman, quite frankly, into trouble in the past with some players. They've been in love with their own guys too much sometimes, and didn't like people who other, guys who were on the outs in the organization might have liked this player, so they didn't like the player anymore. You just, assess the player based on the player, not on who brought him here.
And that's a good point there. You wonder if he just wants to move on because this was Chip's guy, or does he want to say, well, we can be successful with Sam Bradford. But, a lot of people have thought that there's a couple of options, either franchise Bradford. They go the route that was similar to Peterson getting here to Philadelphia, where they bring a veteran. Chase Daniel's name has been mentioned a lot, and then they draft a guy and kind of let Daniel be the guy for a year. In your opinion, Phil, does paying Bradford a $20 million plus contract or even franchising him make more sense than just using a stopgap guy for a year and moving on from Bradford? What is, in your opinion, the best course of action here, specifically with the amount of money they've spent this offseason?
Yeah, well, to me, the best course of action is for Doug Peterson to believe in a quarterback and go hard after that quarterback. That could be, if it's not Bradford, and I can see where you watch film of Bradford and decide, you're lukewarm on him a little bit, or he's just not quite that guy. If that's how you feel about him, then don't do a 1-year deal with him. Don't franchise him and hope somebody else can come along later. Try to figure out right now. Take a look at Chip Kelly, 3 years. Bradford was supposed to be the guy, but he was never quite. In 3 years, he never had a quarterback who was 100%. Believed in or was invested in. He should. His first year, he should have gone. However you could do it, find a guy that you really believe in. The Arizona Cardinals, Bruce Arians gets there, they get Carson Palmer, and that's their guy. And 3 years later, that's their guy. And Chip Kelly was like, well, pick and fold, we'll see how it goes. 3 years later, it was Bradford and Sanchez, and in between, there was never a real feeling like this is Chip Kelly's quarterback. You got to, like Doug Peterson, figure out who's his quarterback, and then make that guy the priority. Right? If you got to draft the guy, you draft the guy. But don't do a big deal with Sam Bradford because he's convenient and he's here. You have to really believe in him if you're going to do that. That's my main thing. I'm not sure myself, whether Bradford is the guy, but Doug Peterson and Howie Roseman are a little, better qualified to judge that stuff. They've got to believe in him, and they've got to decide, focus on the guy, commit to him, and then try to make it work. Doing anything by half measure just won't make any sense.
Phil Sheridan's with us. ESPN.com's NFL Nation covers the Eagles. He's at Sheridan Scribe on Twitter. Your thoughts on Walter Thurman? Had a good year last year, but can they fit him in now?
They could get him. I mean, they would have the cap space to do a deal with him. It probably won't be a huge, monster contract for a guy. I mean, one thing Thurman made clear was that, he might prefer to play cornerback because cornerbacks tend to get paid better in the NFL. I don't know that he's, in a Jim Schwartz defense, is he the kind of guy that you could have playing safety? Some guys like bigger, more physical safeties than the Eagles have had in the last couple of years under Bill Davis' system. So there's a lot going on there. We don't really know what Schwartz is looking for. On the other hand, last year, third playing safety was the first time the Eagles had two really good safeties in a long time. It's been a real problem area for them for a long time. So, I mean, I think you're better off if you can find a way to keep him and, have him as an option. He is a guy that if Schwartz does prefer a bigger safety and more physical safety, he's a guy that could be a nickel cornerback or could just play cornerback in general. And he would just be a good, solid addition all around. But, if he's going to be looking for a big payday in free agency and he thinks cornerback's a better way to do it, he can get a big deal from somebody else, you might have to let them walk based on that. But, again, you'd like to see them identify what they're trying to do and make these pieces fit. And better to keep players that have been here and know, a little bit about, the situation than even to, constantly keep searching for the better guy, the next guy to come along. Always looking for the pie in the sky signing. Thurman's was a good, solid player for them. I think that should count for something with these guys.
Phil, you wrote a scary piece over at ESPN.com about, you mentioned the name Rich Kotite. You're scaring all of us by mentioning that. How is Peterson's hiring reminiscent of Rich Kotite?
Yeah, I was playing the game a little bit there by, as just comparing Peterson to Kotite, but it was more comparing the way Buddy Ryan was basically fired because the owner basically hated his guts by that point. Was much more like what Chip Kelly just went through with Jeff Lurie. I mean, it was more Kelly and Buddy Ryan kind of being in a similar situation than Peterson and Kotite. But Kotite was hired, and for the first couple of years, I mean, they won a playoff game, which they never did under Buddy Ryan, and they never did under Chip Kelly either. They actually won a playoff game in Kotite's second year, so it's not like he was a total disaster. It kind of fell apart. And he's become kind of the butt of a lot of jokes, and he deserves a fair amount of that because he did say some really kind of dumb things as a coach. But it's more like, the amount of damage and sort of the animosity done by the previous head coach puts Peterson in a position that Kotite was in back then. Peterson has the ability to handle it better. He has the opportunity right now to be a better coach than Kotite was, but he's getting the job under similar circumstances, I thought. And I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. I was comparing Kelly in my mind a lot to like Ray Rhodes' tenure because Jeff Lurie was the owner then. But going back, it was really the way Buddy Ryan and Norman Brayman, it all kind of fell apart, and Brayman just wanted him out of the building, which was Veterans Stadium at the time. You could kind of tell that's Jeff Lurie just really wanted Chip Kelly out of the military complex, and he couldn't wait to make that happen, and he did. He's bringing in a guy. Kotite was already on the staff. The idea there was that he would keep the offense, running smoothly, cause as little upset to the rest of the organization as possible. They kept a lot of the staff in place, kept a lot of the players. It was just get rid of the main guy. In that case, it was Buddy Ryan. In this case, it's Chip Kelly. And whether Doug Peterson can make that all work or not, that's up to him. But I don't anticipate a Rich Kotite like tenure from Doug Peterson.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't go down the same road. Although Kotite did get a playoff game and a win, something Buddy never did, and of course something Chip Kelly did not as well. Phil Sheridan, ESPN.com's NFL Nation, at Sheridan Scribe on Twitter, and of course we'll keep our eye on the Fletcher Cox, and we'll keep our eye on Sam Bradford. Those two guys could be very prominent over the next couple of weeks. Thanks, Phil.